Hey, good evening. My name is Straight Talk. Still have a 94-year-old uncle who called me Johnny when I was younger, and he still calls me Johnny. I have friends from Chelsea, and they still call me Johnny, so I decided Johnny Straight Talk. That's how the show's name came about. The premise tonight is Christianity caused its own significant decline. This is part 2 of a program, and the first part was talking about some of the biblical statements about Jesus, and this is about religion and government, and I spoke about Jesus' sayings and other apostles. And now tonight we'll talk about some examples of what I would consider to be reasonable interpretations of what happened during the biblical times and what's happening today. Hi, I'm broadcasting live from the Reading Community TV studios, Massachusetts. You never know who's watching, so USA, the world, the Milky Way. Anyway, this is a call-in talk show program. You're welcome to call in at any time at the number at the bottom of your screen. And it'll be only live tonight, which is on March 14th. After that, there'll be reruns, and you can watch it at different times. There's a schedule on RCTV on the town website. Anyway, last Sunday night, we had a KFC, Knights of Columbus communion breakfast, and I met 2 other people from the group, Janine and Warren. Thank you very much for watching the program. It's great to know people introduce themselves to me. I hope to have had a person here. I guess you can't see that. That's all right. It says Liberal Viewpoint. It's a chair next to me. Well, here you go. It's coming closer. Here it is, Liberal Viewpoint. I was hoping to have a liberal come on the program to at least, make some comments about what he would interpret Jesus' statements. And so, unfortunately, I failed in trying to attract him. He's a good friend, and he's been on the program a few times for different things. In my last program, I read passages, and one of them was about a Pharisee who asked Jesus about paying taxes. And Jesus responded, "Give me a denarii," which was a coinage of that time, Roman coinage. And he took the coin. He said, "Whose face is this?" He said, "Caesar's." And well, Jesus responded, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and render unto God what is God." So in other words, if Caesar was looking for a tax, you pay the tax, and that was it, and the rest would be about God himself or Jesus. That is the only statement I know of in the Bible in which Jesus talked about the role of government and the role of the people in the government. Unfortunately, the Romans were notorious in terms of heavy taxation, but he never spoke about that. He never spoke about that, and to him, as long as you believed in him, meant eternal salvation and also that you would live a happier life. So this is what he had said. Now let's look at today and some examples of what I would say reasonable interpretations of what I would think Jesus and the apostles and disciples would think about what's happened today. The Bible is an ageless book of great principles and interpretation of the way you should live life. Some people consider the Ten Commandments as the 10 suggestions. Well, you can, and you can consider them suggestions when they're convenient and otherwise. But there are consequences, and Jesus made this, God made this creation, his work, his life, his love. And certainly he'd want the best, because we have freedom of choice. We can decide on what we want to do anytime. He didn't put a computer chip in our brain just to simply adore him at his pleasure. Anyway, 90% or more in the United States believe in God. The only written word we have is what the Bible is. And sometimes it's difficult to understand, but certainly as a creator, our creator, he would never have any malevolent intentions, that is, to lead us astray, because he is love, complete love. So I believe what's in the Bible. I don't know how to interpret all of the different things. And I said before, if I ever get up there, I'm going to ask him, why did he make it so difficult? Now, he'll have a clear-cut explanation. I have asked this of many priests and fathers, and I have not gotten a sufficient answer. But anyway, I trust this is the word, I believe it, and I act on it. Now, in Jesus' time, there were a lot of small communities. There was a tremendous amount of interdependence, that is, Christian communities and the people within those communities depended on each other. There wasn't much of any infrastructure like we have here. The government was a hands-off, as I said before. They probably provided the water system, the water, and that's it. No toilet facilities. As we know, what happens out there in that part of the world is still existing today. There was no welfare office. There was no food pantry, no housing assistance, all the things we have here today. You'd grow up in a family which was part of a community, most likely of like-minded people, because that's how they were. You had the Samaritans, you had the Pharisees, you had the Essenes. These were mostly Christian types of communities, Jewish communities, that is, and they believed in different aspects of the Old Testament at that time, because the New Testament was just beginning with Jesus. So I'll discuss a few examples of how to reestablish family and community life here, since I feel we've strayed significantly, if not substantially. We have two kinds of people. We have the makers, those who make money, and there are takers who mostly are getting larger, unfortunately. The takers don't care as much about what's happening as long as they get a certain amount of benefits, they're happy. Now, the evidence is that right now, a study of the federal income tax code and also records about nearly 50% of U.S. citizens do not pay taxes. This is a substantial increase over the time I grew up in the 50s. So what I would like and what I think would work best, and certainly we've gone astray much because the government costs us a lot of money. Our goal is to reestablish that kind of personal responsibility that we've disconnected from a long way here. My first example is unwed mothers. In biblical times, and even as early as the early 1900s, we have essentially very few services. And the first service that really came about was probably in the 1940s with FDR. At that time, he started the first kind of safety net. But right now, mostly the families operate on their own. If they needed help, they went to their neighbors or within their own community. Love and care from other Christians was rather typical because there was no other alternative. If you're out in a farm somewhere or you're up in the hills in Massachusetts or other places, there tends to be a stronger bond of people because of fragility of life. Today, fast forward to the 1900s, I was talking about FDR. Well, FDR started probably the major first step in our welfare plan, which was to give money to widows. I mean, certainly a very valid kind of, I guess, benefit part of the government. But he was fearful at the time that this would grow out of control, and boy, was he ever correct. We have today welfare checks that come right into the homes of people. There's no love attached. To that. There's no connection between a community, in many cases even a family. Great majority of these mothers, teen mothers mostly, they just don't have the kind of love that other families have. And there's few consequences for the behavior that they exhibit. Another aspect which is negative is that it takes away money or resources from those who really need it. And that's probably a significant amount right at this stage here. We essentially encourage more of that because other children in the city, mostly this is in the city, but there is the same problem in the suburbs. We find that children or teens they see the consequences of their behavior. If they don't, then why not? More money, more checks, without any correction from families or living up in families results in more of the same. They look to the baby for love. And you can't blame them in some respects because they live in a family that may not have that loving relationship that most of other families have. It is destructive not only to the family but also to the community, and that's where it's not good at all. So even other teens, that I was saying, are influenced. This just encourages others to consider doing the same thing. They may be lacking love. So it's a serious problem for families and communities because there's really no bonding, no support, or very little support for them to change the behavior or see what the right behavior is. They see more of it, why not? It's an easy way of getting away from the family. You may have Section 8 apartments and all these kinds of things. Let's look at some data. In the 1960s, about 5% of whites here in the United States they had a fatherless family unit, that is, there was one unwed mother, about 5% of the population. Among the black people, it was about 25%. Today, we can look at three groups. Today, if you average the three groups, which is white, non-Hispanic, and Hispanic, and blacks, you're talking about 40% of all children being born in the United States are fatherless. You can break it down to about 30% for non-Hispanic whites. Then you can look at about 50% for Hispanics, and today it's about 70% for blacks. These are indisputable figures. Very few would even bother contesting them. So, how has society benefited from this? Certainly, far from benefiting, it is part of the self-destructive part of the community that we live in, and results in a lot of other negative social behavior, from poor parenting, children, beginning children, poor schooling, and we can see the results in the decimation of the black family in the inner city. Church could play a major role in helping this, and they do in some places. But unfortunately, the percentage still continues. So what has happened to change this? There has been some change. Quickly, Governor Weld, he changed it in the early 1990s. And he changed the welfare law, not on his own, because we had Democrats, about 80–90% of the total legislature. So guess what would happen? Without the legislature, which is predominantly Democratic, finally, together, they decided to not to give certain benefits to encourage this behavior, or fatherless children. Probably winter clothing, that allowance. We continue to increase the benefits from the 1950s to the 1990s, to today's present day, until the 1990s. At that point in time, it changed. The benefits would change. If you had an extra child, you would not get an additional benefit. It did take courage, because let's face it, the ones who were given all these benefits were the Democrats. They were typically in the forefront. They want to increase government size. They're not interested in the family in many respects. They want to have a socialistic government control. That is what they want. And so one way is to destroy the family. And again, if you don't think I'm speaking properly, call my phone right now, tell me where I'm wrong, or at least let's engage. This is the, kind of beliefs the liberal Democrats are. And don't ever forget, I was a liberal Democrat, voted for Ted Kennedy before Napa, Chappaquiddick, and all the others, until I was in my 40s and realized how foolhardy I was. And I've apologized many times to the communities who have been destroyed by unwed mothers, and say, I contributed to that, but that ended at that time. Well, it's halfway through the program, and I just want to summarize. I'm talking about, as you can see on your screen, it's about religion and government, about Christianity, how it's caused its own significant decline. We're talking about Jesus' statements, how there were very few, essentially no statements by Jesus other than one time when he said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar, and render unto God what is God's. So other than that, we have strayed very greatly from those principles that Jesus himself, if he wanted to, he could have railed against the government of Rome. He didn't. He was looking out for the individuals. The individuals have control of their own behavior. To believe in him and grow and then live and eventually die and have salvation, and during that time to be guided by his 10 Commandments. Anyway, another example, Catholic hospitals. The Catholic hospitals in Massachusetts, the Archdiocese of Massachusetts, were all under basically a group called the Caritas. They were run by the diocese, and they complied with the kinds of beliefs that the Catholic Church believed. No birth control being dispensed, and abortion was not permitted. Well, today, through many different kinds of situations with the Catholic Church, decline, etc., they're unable to continue on with the ownership, and they sold the hospitals to another group, a secular group. Sean O'Malley presided over that. Caused a lot of disappointment about what would happen under a secular group in terms of running these hospitals. Anyway, what happened is that the church now is an agent for the government. They don't own the hospitals, but they've been promised by the local authorities, the state authorities, they will run the hospitals as if they were Catholic. Well, that's not going to last very long. As we well know, that if the law is that you can't discriminate against certain kinds of procedures, then you can't do it. Eventually, that has to change. So I'm not sure under what spell Cardinal O'Malley thinks that they're going to continue, but he's doing the best he can. They were going to be sold anyway. You had Catholic doctors, you had nurses, who were dedicated Catholics, and try to keep the situation as close as possible to what it is. But you can see, again, how the continuation of this policy is going to end. And again, because of the ineffectiveness of the Catholic Church, has been able to convince the people to give up more of their resources. And then you have the sexual abuse scandal, which caused a tremendous decline in contributions. So we have all that, but they cause, I feel, their own problem. There is societal issues, no question about it. But they're the managers, and unfortunately weren't able to convince enough people to give them the kind of money to continue the arrangement. So unfortunately, again, we have created our own problem in sense of we violate our own beliefs, we will be eventually under the new secular authorities. Well, now it comes to my personal responsibility. Granted, I take that approach only because if I'm using these words and I also talk to you about this, then really, what do I do to help out? The buck stops here and it starts here. So I'll tell you some of the things that I do. And I practice what I preach. Straight Talk is about my life experiences and how to reduce these serious negative societal consequences. It's based mostly upon my life, but also about my personal philosophy. And I encourage anyone who has other opinions to come and talk. I admired Senator William Proxmire from Wisconsin. He was a senator from about 1957 up to 1988. You may recall he was the one who invented the golden Fleece Award. And to anybody in the government that he served, he would just bring out some of these most outrageous kinds of wastefulness of government. Unfortunately, he died, and we don't have a William Proxmire anymore. But I wish there was somebody else. I do some of the things that he does. And I do the things that I think are good, and I invite others who don't think I'm saying the right thing, give me the other point of view. I've discussed things here about Notorious book in the high school, where the heart is. I've talked about certain aspects of traditional marriage, homosexuality, effect of children. These are all kinds of things I've done here in this program, including health programs, others. I'm looking out what I feel is the best interest. I've talked about diabetes, I've talked about prostate cancer, and government, financial. I cover a number of different topics. And so these are the things that I believe, and I'm hoping to share those with the public to maybe learn faster than I did. You know, I've made significant mistakes in my life. Fortunately, I'm still alive, so that it can't be too bad. Another example, Kathy and Deacon Goldie. Well, I go to St. Agnes Church, and I had a group called Arise. I was one of many small groups in the Arise program. And this woman I met, Mary Kale. Mary, hopefully you'll be watching. And she used to drive a woman by the name of Kathy to the church. And occasionally I sit next to him. And Mary, unfortunately, wasn't able to continue on driving her to church. So why not step in? So I did. And for the last year or so, I have driven Kathy. I won't mention her last name. After 4 or 5 months, I realized it was Deacon Andy. He was also at the same place. So I said, come on over. So we all go to the 11 o'clock service, and other times we share other times, 7:30 and otherwise. But yeah, it takes me some time to go to another part of Reading, but it's not a great thing that I'm doing, but it's something. I've got 2 people, and there's a possibility of 3, who knows? So I do that because I feel I'm doing the Lord's work, as well as many of you in the town may not be Christians, but you could even be better than a Christian, and that's possible. Along with that, I also donate money to the Pregnancy Crisis Center, which helps unwed mothers. I just started that. I also have a Choose Life license plate on my car. Yes, I am advertising that I believe in the unborn having a chance to live. In fact, as far as blacks go, unfortunately, it is more dangerous. The most dangerous place, and this was an ad that they tried to place on a billboard, was the most dangerous place to be as an unborn child is in the womb, because there's about 60% of those black unborn children are aborted. Very high percentage. I'm an activist member of Life and Family at St. Agnes. That means I'm quite involved, and I feel dedicated to the causes of family and life, from the beginning to the end. And in summary, about my own person, I feel good after I do this. You know, there are a lot of unhappy people, yet, you know, it does take an effort, but the reward is there. And I encourage you to consider that. If you do, you will be rewarded in more ways than one. Another area, example, adoption of children. Well, we have undermined our own beliefs. About 15 years ago, homosexuals were allowed to adopt children. Catholics, Catholic Charities would give the church an opportunity to have a child in their auspices, and in turn, some children were given to homosexual couples or homosexuals. Sean O'Malley changed that. You cannot believe in one thing and do another. Bad example, bad behavior. The intentions were there, but unfortunately, the consequences were not really understandable. So what happened is Sean O'Malley discontinued the practice. And that's another area where they have caused their own significant decline. You know, if the church does things, says one thing, and you do another, very bad. So let me kind of summarize. In many ways, the Catholic liberals really undermine Jesus' leadership in many ways, because they believe the government is really the response that they want. And they do support the government. We all support the government. But they are on the forefront of displacing their response. responsibility to the government. The greater the involvement of the government, the more fragmentation you'll get, and the less effective the community is able to alter self-destructive behavior, especially among teen mothers, which is a source of many of our inner-city problems. So another part of the summary, the government tries to make us think that we're better off. However, we lose our freedom and undermines the community spirit of independence. Another issue. We're displacing our responsibility to the government, and that means more makers will pay for the takers because of irresponsible behavior, which is kind of the hallmark of many cases of some of the things that happen, where the ones who make the money are going to pay for those, whether it's welfare, whether it's even affordable housing. All these programs are the same kind of thing. So it's kind of another point is, from biblical times to the early 1900s, were far better times and kept irresponsibility at a lower level. The current financial crisis that we have right now has a silver cloud, a little silver lining in the cloud. Even though it's hurt a lot of people, it's hurt my company. We took a 25% cut in pay, nothing that I ever want anyone to go through. But because of our irresponsibility and our dual-party system, which both are complicit in this financial crisis we have, we are now going to have to make deep cuts. Many of these programs will then restore somewhat to the community. The kinds of rightful obligations and responsibility that we have. So there's a benefit there. The last thing I want to talk about to the young people, you who are sons and daughters of liberal parents, you'll go to school and you'll be taught by leftist professors who claim to have freedom of speech. Yet colleges today are the most totalitarian places in the United States. Free speech means not free speech. It's only what they speak is free. If you talk about pro-life, anything to do with religion, that's not free speech. It's really an atmosphere which is really kind of goes against liberalism as it was. The new liberals from the last 30, 40 years are not the liberals of my uncle, where liberalism was the freedom of expression. And Harvey Silverglate, who wrote a book, Shadow University, talks about this in great depth. You students, you keep on listening to those professors, and you come out, make sure you forget everything in terms of that kind of stuff. You'll lose more money because your money, they're going to take it away from you through all these programs that your parents support. Again, none of your parents have ever come to this seat, but I acknowledge Paula DiGiovanni. Her two daughters, I've had interactions with them, and they seem very reasonable. Hopefully I don't get the two children in trouble. Anyway, that's it. Straight talk, and that's all it is. It comes from my heart. You may not like it, but you have the opportunity right here, anytime, to come to the program. And good night. No paper tonight. I just had enough time to finish what I was going to say, and it worked out perfectly. And again, I wish that some would call, make a comment anytime. Hey, that worked out well.